Cheers, Dave.
Cheers, Sandy.
Cheers. How are you?
I'm good, and you?
I'm good. Good,
What are we
good.
talking about today?
Well, it's the end of the year, and usually at this time of year, people are looking forward and making resolutions. But today, you and I, we're going to look backwards and talk about gratitude and what we're grateful for and gratitude practices that you can share with your clients. And this can be a really, really lovely year-end practice to talk about gratitude. So, Dave, where does this word gratitude come from and what is it anyway?
Yeah, to start, gratitude comes from the Latin word gratia, which, depending on the context, translates to grace, graciousness, or gratefulness.
Hmm, graciousness. I like that. And we did a lot of research for this episode. So yeah, we we whittled it down, believe you me.
There's a lot out there.
But one thing that stood out to me is that gratitude lingers. So it's not expected. And gratitude is also deeply, deeply personal. And the idea of gratitude has been poetically defined as the memory of the heart. That's Jean Massieu, The Moral Memory of Mankind from George Simmel, and the Queen of Virtues, which is Cicero. Cicero. And that's from the musical Chicago, Cicero.
I love those quotes. So
Have you seen
poetic.
have you seen Chicago? Wait, I was gonna sing, Dave. No,
Oh,
I'm not.
sorry, go.
I'm not kidding. But yeah, so I mean, we're talking about gratitude. Is this the same thing as being thankful? What do you think?
Yeah, it's probably a little different than being thankful. A lot of people define thankful as being as feeling pleased or relieved, but also you're kind of conscious of what you received, what those benefits that you got. So it's about expressing that feeling of thanks for something that somebody did for you. So it can be a little bit transactional, like someone held open a door for you, and then you say thanks. However, expressing gratitude can be thought of as being thankful for small moments that happen all the time and some that are not so obvious.
Yeah, that word transaction came up for me too as you were talking. Like being thankful is transactional, but gratitude is, yeah, like not so obvious and deeper. But for today, we might be using those terms interchangeably. So, don't call us out on it. We're trying to keep things simple. And so, yeah, during this episode, we'll be talking about what can keep us from feeling gratitude. We're going to talk about toxic gratitude, and we'll offer some tools that you can use to help your clients and yourself to cultivate gratitude. Because yes, we can cultivate this thing called gratitude, which I'll speak more about in a minute. But first, what is important about gratitude? How's that for a coaching question?
Very open because
Good,
the
right?
topic is very broad.
Yeah.
You and I have been looking into this, and there's actually more out there than we thought, I think.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah, if you're practicing gratitude all the time, people have found that you're happier overall if you regularly practice this. There seems to be reduced fear and anxiety, so increasing the effects of positive emotions as well as motivation. And there are research studies backing all this, and also that these practices can give people resilience to past and future traumas through reframing and building that resilience. And there are even research studies that show that can boost your social relationships. And that's not just at workplace, but it can be in your personal life. And also, more importantly, maybe your relationship to yourself. And there's some really interesting stuff out there also that show that health metrics like inflammatory markers, stress, depression, other mental health markers are all reduced through regular gratitude practices. So there's a lot that you can get from having these gratitude practices.
Yeah, and my partner here, David Chen, he pulled out all the studies, which is awesome. So we will be saying we'll put that link in the show notes a lot today, because there's a lot out there on gratitude, and I'm grateful for you for finding all that research and study. That's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Thanks for that.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
You know what? As we were talking, though, I was curious about positive psychology. So,
Yeah.
how does positive psychology come into play when we think of gratitude?
Yeah, this came up in my research, and basically we focus on what we lack. As human beings, this is what we do. And psychiatrists used to do this too, to focus on what is wrong and how to fix what is wrong to reduce symptoms. So it's like kind of looking at the negative side of things. And positive psychology shifted this way of thinking. In the 1950s, I think that's when the term positive psychology first came into being. And it really became a branch of psychology in the 1990s. And it invited people to also focus on what's good or what's right in their lives. And also to cultivate, there's that word again, to cultivate good things. And yes, gratitude is one of those things that can be cultivated. Um, Other things to cultivate might include resilience, which you mentioned, and compassion, maybe knowing what one's strengths are. And it's interesting, all these things that I just mentioned are the very things that we coaches invite our clients to do, to cultivate these things: resilience, compassion, strengths.
Yeah, totally agree with that. And a lot of that happens in my work too. But yeah, it's a truth that negative motivators can drive people to do things. However, I've found that when people focus on these negative motivators, then what happens is when they get dealt with, then people often stop the practices that got them there because they erase the negative. However, it may be more optimal to acknowledge the positive aspects of these practices so that they'll keep going and keep building on these positive results that will last beyond the removal of these negatives. So, yeah, positive psychology seemed to really hang on that and has really improved on that.
Yeah, and that reminds me of a post in our coaching Facebook group when we were talking about coaching around the negative.
Mm.
And you just said that, like, yeah, maybe once the negative is removed, then there's sort of a standstill, instead of continuing to look forward to like the positive and the good. And again, we as humans, we just don't do that. So it was an interesting discussion over there in that group. But
Yeah. And so, what can keep us from feeling gratitude? What do you think about that?
yeah. So our minds really trick us to not feel grateful. As I mentioned, we focus on what we lack, we focus on the negative. So when we're mired in that, we usually forget completely about anything good, and we completely forget how to be grateful.
Yeah, there is some research out there that shows you may need up to 3 or 4 more positive thoughts to counteract a single negative one. So we're really more easily affected by negative inputs than positive ones. And that kind of makes sense because, through evolution and evolutionary times, we're running from all these dangers, these saber-toothed tigers that want to kill us. So we're predisposed to really pay attention to those things that could really harm us. But unfortunately, we need a lot more positive things to overcome these negative things that we see in our lives.
As you were saying that, I was like, oh man, that's depressing. Because I'm going to the negative. I'm like 3 to 4. It
Oh, no.
sounds like so much work. But yeah, it's interesting. It's we're designed to be safe, to keep
Mm-hmm.
ourselves safe. But yeah, I heard a great metaphor on this podcast, which we'll put in the show notes. The Hidden Brain podcast. Excuse me. And they talk about walking down the street on a really windy day, and how, sometimes we have a headwind and sometimes we have a tailwind, and the tailwind feels amazing and it helps you get to where you want to go. And the thing is, like, if you're in that headwind, it can be really hard to walk through. Maybe it's cold outside, your eyes are watering, it's hard to keep your balance. And when we have a headwind like that, we lose sight of that tailwind and we lose sight of everything that's good. And that can be really hard. It can be really hard to remember the things that we can be thankful for, that we're grateful for. So when things go well, when we have that tailwind pushing us, we'll say we'll never feel ungrateful again. But then the little things, the headwind starts creeping up again and we forget our blessings. And so, yeah, in other words, barriers, challenges, they need attention, sure. But the good things that are helping you, that are boosting you, that tailwind, those also can be enjoyed at the same time. Keywords at the same time.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I love that metaphor. As a guy who used to run, and occasionally I hit a headwind,
Yeah.
the truth is there's always a tailwind after the headwind. So, or if you go out and it's a headwind and you turn around and you come back, the wind's blowing still the same way. It's blowing behind you now. It's pushing you back home. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's never always a headwind.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what else can keep us from feeling gratitude?
Well, you know how I feel about emotions. So let's talk about feelings and emotions. Um, so yeah, if we're stuck in feelings such as resentment or entitlement, these feelings in particular can be very toxic to being able to allow in gratitude. And they sort of shield us, and not in a good way, from being able to fully feel and sense that gratitude. And comparison is another thing that is coming up that can keep us from feeling gratitude. If you think about keeping up with the Joneses, I think I'm aging myself here with that phrase. Excuse me, but like social media, trying to keep up with the influencers on social media. And gratitude is going to be really hard to come by if you only see what you lack. And Theodore Roosevelt, he said, comparison is the thief of joy. So these things will not allow you to feel grateful. Some other things. I got a big frog in my throat today, people. Ribbit, ribbit. I'm going to be muting myself a lot to clear my throat. But yeah, some other things that can keep us from feeling gratitude are lack of community, lack of connection. And this is so huge in today's world of screens, computers, email, social media, blah, 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 blah. We're alone. We're here with our little screens. And, social media is social, air quotes, to a point. But truly, we're all in our own little worlds looking down at these screens. And as a result, we mistakenly believe that our troubles are ours alone. And which is so not true. Everyone has troubles. You just don't see them on social media very often. So, yeah, just knowing that others are experiencing that headwind, those challenges as well, this can really help cultivate a sense of gratitude. And again, we just don't see this on social media. Comparison is the thief of joy.
Love that quote.
Yeah. And there's also this idea of having a very self-centered view of life, and that this can keep us from feeling gratitude. So the idea is to take a wider, more expansive worldview, and this is a skill that can be learned with practice. And this is where a coach can be really useful to help shift your perspective. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, some of the things I've seen also in session, I've seen a lot of the things that you've talked about. Let's see, we've been talking a lot about a negative orientation in your life. So that can really help, hinder actually, you feeling gratitude. Living as if everyone's out to get you. And that can be tough. We've talked about the saber-toothed tiger a little bit, but if you perceive everything as being an attack on you, then you're always on guard and watching out for that. And so it's really hard to see that you can be grateful for something when you feel like you're being attacked. Yeah, there could be something in your past that happened to you that maybe predisposed you to not be able to feel thankful or grateful. Maybe even things like fixed mindset versus growth. So instead of seeing an opportunity to learn where you made a big mistake or you felt like you failed, that made you feel worse instead of looking at it, oh, I'm actually learning and benefiting from this. And then there's also the concept of scarcity mindset versus abundance. So if you feel like you never have enough stuff and that you're not getting enough, you're not saving enough, all this kind of thing, then it can be really tough to feel gratitude for all the things that you might not have, or you want to have more of later. You really do have a lot of. So
Yeah, I'm giggling and probably turning pink here because that last one hit home for me, the scarcity mindset. That's something I struggle with. Um, but I do have to say, like, moving towards a space of abundance, even in a sense of fake it till you make it with that mindset, it 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 has created like huge shifts in my life. And I'd say like gratitude is part of that abundance mindset for sure. Yeah.
great stuff to hear.
Yeah.
Um, Here's a concept for you. I know we've talked about it. What about toxic gratitude? What are your
Mm.
thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I listened to this fabulous podcast episode by Mel Robbins, and we'll link it in the show notes. A lot of resources in those notes for this one. But she talked about toxic gratitude, and I hadn't really heard of this before. So, in a nutshell, toxic gratitude is when you ignore the challenging stuff and pretend everything is okay, maybe put out this false sense of gratitude. Kind of goes hand in hand with toxic positivity, which maybe some of you have heard of before. But yeah, in that podcast, Mel Robbins gives a bunch of examples, and I'll give four of them here. So first example is when you say you are grateful, blessed, blessed, hashtag grateful, but you really aren't doing well. So basically, you're lying about what's going on. And we see this a little bit, or maybe a lot on Instagram, social media again. And yeah, I spoke of comparison above, and social media can really make us compare our lives to those perfect, big air quotes, lives of those influencers and people online. And comparison is the thief of joy and gratitude. But genuine gratitude, it gives space for the good stuff as well as the painful and messy and negative stuff. So that's the first one. Second one is when we manipulate others into shame and guilt. I sense you smiling, Dave. Um, I'm thinking about parents like, you should be grateful for what's on your plate. Or another example, maybe a friend has chronic illness and is really struggling, but hey, at least they can get up in the morning and work. And so you might say to them, well, you should be really grateful you're actually able to go to work. And that kind of dismisses their whole experience of chronic illness. So instead of being that person, you might say, it's so great you're able to go to work. And it really sucks because this illness has taken so much away from you. So again, there's room for both. Are you seeing a theme here? Seeing a pattern?
Yeah, definitely so. Actually, when you were saying that, I was thinking about all the times I was told to finish my plate because there are people starving in other parts of the world and all that. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
wow,
Exactly,
you hit it on
exactly.
the nose there.
Yeah, so we shame our kids into feeling gratitude, which might be not a good thing. So another way toxic gratitude can show up is when we are using gratitude to escape uncomfortable emotions. So, for example, if a loved one dies after a long, hard battle with cancer, you might say, I'm just grateful they are no longer suffering. And this just completely dismisses whatever grief or sadness you may be experiencing. And this one is really important to give time to process those challenging emotions in the moment, because the longer you ignore them, the longer it will take to process them down the road, and they will just keep building. So it's okay, again, to include the bad stuff along with the good stuff. So I'm grateful they are no longer suffering, and I'm devastated that they are gone. And if we continually dismiss those challenging emotions, we can even prevent gratitude from entering in. And Brene Brown has a great quote on this. She says, when we numb hard feelings, we numb gratitude. Any thoughts on that one before my last example?
Yeah, that one is super important to note that even though we're trying to promote gratitude as a practice right now, there are times probably where gratitude is very difficult to feel. And that's okay. So let's acknowledge that this is a difficult situation and that we do have whatever is going on inside us, what we're feeling, what we're experiencing, what we're going through. And maybe we aren't very grateful at that moment. Um, so it's not like life is 100% full of gratitude, but maybe we're talking about a greater than 51% of the time we would like to feel gratitude towards most of the things, and that provides like a healthy balance between those times that we truly are grateful and those times when, you know what, I'm not really grateful that this bad thing happened to me. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as you were talking, something came up, which is maybe a practice, and we're going to be talking about practices in a minute. But this idea of looking back on your life, like the long term, and looking at those negative times and reframing them to a point of gratitude. Like, as health coaches, many of us got into health coaching because of our own experiences with chronic illness. And, I have that experience of Hashimoto's, autoimmune disease. And in this space now, 10 plus years after being diagnosed, I am so grateful for it, because it's truly brought me to where I am today with my coaching business. I never would have met you. I never would have met all of our colleagues and friends, and learned everything about myself, and had my own self growth and self learnings. In the moment, was I grateful? Hell no. It sucked when I got that diagnosis. I just wanted to feel better. And that goes back to like getting rid of the negative and just getting to a point where you're like, okay, the negative is gone. But now I'm definitely in a place where it's like, yes, there's so much more. And without all of that, nothing over here would have been possible. I'm talking with my hands a lot. But
yeah, I
anyway,
totally agree with that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
And
yeah, we may have these times where we are not so grateful or find it hard to find gratitude. I guess the point here is that there are people who are potentially stuck in maybe 100% of the time not able to feel thankful for anything in their world, or gratitude, express gratitude towards anything. And we want to try to move beyond that and towards a place of more gratitude than none.
yeah. One last example of toxic gratitude before we move forward. And this is when you use gratitude as a justification to stay stuck. And I hear this one a lot in my coaching sessions. So I work with a lot of people in the corporate world these days. There's a lot of layoffs happening. So clients will maybe complain about their job, and then they say, you know what? I am just grateful to have a job. So many people are getting laid off. I'm grateful to be here. And then it creates this sort of bubble that they can't move out of, and they can't move forward. Like they want a promotion, but they should just be grateful. And so you can be grateful, and what more? This is okay. This is okay. So gratefulness should not block the desire for change. So when you are just grateful for what is without looking to improve and continually grow, you keep yourself in a place where you will feel less than amazing. In other words, thinking and saying, I should be grateful, this keeps you stuck.
Yeah, that word should have alerted you to something that could have been explored, right? Whenever somebody says, I should be something, there's probably more to take a look at there and something to dig into. Yeah, definitely for sure.
So, with that idea that gratitude is not only an emotion, but a skill. So you're curating your own emotional state. Let's talk about tools that we can use in coaching sessions, or you can just use on your own. These are great practices to use at year's end, either for yourself or for your clients, but really they're wonderful to use any time of the year. So let's start with the practice of keeping a gratitude journal. So this is a popular one. So what is a gratitude journal, and what would you say about this particular practice?
Yeah, a gratitude journal is very simple. All you do is regularly write down some things, some number. You can say, even from 1 to 10, it doesn't matter how many things that you're thankful for right at that moment or right for that day. You can actually write it down. It can be vocal too. Journaling can be vocal as well. You can record it or not. Just say it out loud is also a great idea. But the key idea is to do it regularly, consistently, and to really experience, hopefully, that change in mindset through this regular practice. And that's it.
Yeah, yeah, it's so simple. And I have some clients who do this every night before they go to bed. They just write down three things they're grateful for. And it can be very simple, very, very specific things, but just very simple. They don't do a whole long journaling practice. And then they do the same thing in the morning. And what this does is it sort of allows the mind before you're going to sleep to sort of be in that positive state instead of having all those unproductive thoughts kind of taken over. And same thing in the morning, you wake up and you write down these things you're grateful for, and that sets the tone for the day. So it can be a really simple but really beautiful and powerful practice.
Yeah,
What
definitely
else?
so. Well, here's another variation on this kind of theme of regular practice. So there's some researchers who've done this with a bunch of people. You can also create a gratitude practice by finding a story that talks about receiving gratitude. So this can be something from your own experience where you did something for someone and someone reflected back to you, oh my God, I'm so thankful that you did this for me. Uh, or it can even just be a scene in a movie, for example, or maybe a passage in a story that you read, something that deeply affected you. And you said, wow, somebody did something for somebody, and look at what happened. For some reason, it just kind of affected you inside. And once you get that scene or story, or whether it's from you or from a book or something you read, then you just want to repeat that story to yourself on a regular basis. And it doesn't have to be every day, actually. People have found that you could do this as little as once a week. It's had effects. But some people say, try to do it a little bit more often, like 3 to 5 times a week. And that seems to have elicited change in a whole bunch of research subjects, which is pretty fascinating to me.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Like you can even take something from a movie or a book. Um, and actually, that reminds me of another practice I'm going to mention later. Yeah, I just made that connection now. Interesting. I'll bring it up later.
Yes,
Um,
please.
yeah, you mentioned repeating this story to yourself on a regular basis. And one thing I was going to offer was to set an alarm a few times a day. And this can be an alarm to remind yourself of that story, or or maybe the alarm just reminds you to simply notice what you're thinking, feeling, doing at that moment as it relates to gratitude. And again, write it all down or speak it out loud, and you develop that gratitude in that manner when you sort of pause and savor that sensation.
Yeah. And what about expressing gratitude to others whenever you can? So it can be thanking them for something that they did, which is a pretty obvious one, um, or just thanking them for something they did a long time ago, or just even being there. Um, but just get in that mode of just expressing thankfulness all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that came up for me when I was researching was the idea of a gratitude visit, and or a gratitude letter. The idea being you write something down or you have something in your mind, and then you give that person that you're feeling gratitude towards, you give them a letter or you visit them in person and tell them. You tell them. It's that simple. Or, drop it in the mail, maybe send an email. But again, these exercises are so simple. It sounds so silly as I'm talking. They're so simple. But even just telling another person that you're grateful for something they did can provide such a boost to your well-being.
Yeah, I love that. Even a business email, as you're writing it, just kind of slip in a sentence that says, "Hey, thanks for your thoughts yesterday at that meeting that we were at." Just even a one-liner in a text in an email. That
Yeah.
speaks to me about ways to really embody some practice in your daily life all the time. So it isn't just about, oh, I'm going to do it 3 times in the morning and then forget about it for the rest of the day. But this is a way to kind of continually do it all day long. And when you can do that and remember it, it becomes really a part of your life, which is really important. Um, and then there's showing appreciation, which is alongside this concept of thanking somebody for doing something for you, or in that email we were just talking about. So this could probably be its own podcast about how to show appreciation, but generally you want to find something about a person to appreciate. You can start with something obvious, like the way they look, but ideally be something more than just surface level. They say, "Hey, nice hair today," or whatever. So again, being genuine here is really important. It may come off as unauthentic if you're not, so it can take some practice to get good at it. But when you're actively expressing appreciation, remember that you're not just affecting yourself, but also others around you. So the benefits of gratitude get extended beyond just the recipient of your appreciation. They too will feel good with those lowered fear and anxiety responses and more inclined to connect socially, which is stuff we talked about that people found were benefits in research. So isn't that worth for spreading the appreciation around you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And something that's coming up for me as you're talking is this idea of saying it out loud, and just the power of literally speaking these things and these words instead of just thinking about them, even instead of writing them. I mean, writing them down can be powerful. And, maybe there's an argument for literally writing instead of typing as well, but that's neither here nor there. But when we speak, it creates a more real experience. It creates new neural pathways. And I can't tell you how many sessions I've had with clients who, they're verbal processors. They talk through things. And that is a huge part of the session for them, to hear themselves speak things out loud, because maybe they've never spoken those things out loud before. And to do this with gratitude, with appreciation, just it's huge. It's huge. And the other thing that's coming up for me is language, and the idea of, being mindful of your language when you do say things out loud, because language can trick you into negative things, and it can trick you into feeling grateful as well. So, like, for example, instead of saying I have to do something, instead say I get to do something. And again, it's so simple. I'm blessed to be able to do something because XYZ. Find an answer and reason for doing what you get to do, not what you have to do. That's my rant on language for today. I'm done.
Nope, I'm a big believer too that words have power, just like you said. So yeah, the more we can kind of curate the words that we use to say things, and as you say, verbal processors, it happens to them a lot, but for anyone to be able to go through in their brain exactly what's going on and be able to articulate it, that process is so important. And then if we throw in the words of gratitude in there, then these words will affect you in the same way. And by the way, you are also affecting others who hear your words. So really, really important. Yeah. So what else? Anything else come to mind?
Yeah, a couple other exercises come to mind. I mentioned earlier about, seeking different opinions, different thoughts, different information. So seeking out the opposite. Again, we look for the negative. So the mind has a tendency to feel envious, entitled, resentful. So look for the opposite, look for that tailwind. And yeah, this doesn't come easily in this day and age. It has to be cultivated. Remember those three or four positive thoughts to that one negative, and we've got to work on this. It's not just going to happen without a little bit of effort on this parts, because we are wired to do the opposite. And yeah, my final invitation for an exercise is to listen to stories of gratitude. And this idea came to me through a podcast, which we'll put in the show notes, from Tara Brach. She's got some great talks, and she had a talk on gratitude I listened to in preparation for this episode. And at the end of the episode, she handed a microphone around the audience and just asked people to say one or two things they're grateful for. And it brought me to tears. It was so powerful, just hearing the everyday simple things that people are grateful for. So yeah, I'll link that in the show notes. It's a good one. So we've talked a lot about these practices, given listeners a lot of ideas. How do we sustain these practices?
Great question, because I don't know about you, but I've had a lot of clients who talk about doing a gratitude practice, and for some reason they just,
Yep.
yep,
Fizzles out.
fizzles out.
Sounds great in theory.
That's right. Well, first is the kind of the basics, which is, life is an experiment. You got to take a leap of faith in something that maybe you've heard about, like your gratitude practice, but maybe there isn't some belief in it that it's going to actually do something. But you know what? Hopefully you, after listening to this podcast, you've realized that there is some real research that backs the benefits of these practices. So, once you start, take some time to acknowledge the feelings inside you before and after you do them. Really become aware of yourself and also in responses to others, right? See how they're responding to you if you're showing appreciation or being thankful for what they've done. Sometimes writing these down, like recording them in a journal and that kind of thing, is great for awareness building and tracking. So write a few notes before you begin the practice, and then again after, about how you feel about everything. Track this over time just to see how things improve. It's, in many ways, it could be like working out. Results build over time. So you have to just trust that other people have done this, smarter than you and I here, that have proven that this stuff actually works. So you just got to go and do it too, and have faith that it's going to have some good effect on you. You just got to watch for it and wait.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm doubly grateful that you found all those studies, because those are important to, measuring things is important. So this isn't just some woo thing. It's like there's science behind it. And something else to keep in mind is that it's a practice. It's like it's not one and done. Talking with my hands again here. It's something you do over and over again. It's a practice. You do it over and over again until it's a habit. And eventually you become a grateful person. Like out of habit, you're just a grateful person. But it does take effort and practice. And one last thing I invite people to think about is not only cultivating gratitude in the present, but also the future. So to sort of be grateful for what's next as well. And this is something I ask my clients in sessions all the time. Maybe I'll ask it in a closure session. I'll ask, what do you want to be most grateful for in a year, to get them really thinking about it. Or in a, standard session in the middle of a coaching relationship, what do you want to be grateful for after accomplishing this action step? And again, just inviting them to think about that, to look ahead, cultivate gratitude into their future self.
I love those questions. I'm going to steal them. Hopefully you don't mind. As
Nope.
always, we steal from each other all the time. So
All good. Yeah.
I'm very grateful for stealing from you.
I don't have a scarcity mindset anymore, so go ahead.
Thanks.
It's all abundance.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, what else about gratitude?
Well, we got some quotes. We're going to close with some quotes on gratitude. You want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Here's one.
Oh,
When you are grateful, fear disappears and abundance appears. Yeah, there you go, Sandy.
abundance.
That's by our one of our favorite people, Tony Robbins.
Yeah, Tony, love that one. Here's one. When I started counting my blessings, my whole life turned around. From one of my favorite people, Willie Nelson.
Yeah,
Love
great
that guy.
guy. How about this one? Gratitude unlocks the fullness of life. It turns what we have into enough and more. It turns denial into acceptance, chaos to order, confusion to clarity. It can turn a meal into a feast, a house into a home, a stranger into a friend. By Melody Beattie.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack there, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. So I have one final quote. It's a little bit longer, and I actually shortened it for this episode, but it's from the writer Anne Lamott, who I love. So she says, gratitude begins in our hearts and then dovetails into behavior. We mysteriously find ourselves willing to pick up litter in the street or let others go first in traffic. You breathe in gratitude and you breathe it out too. Once you learn how to do that, then you can bear someone who is unbearable. How can something so simple be so profound? Letting others go first in traffic or in line at Starbucks, even if no one cares or notices. Because for the most part, people won't care. They won't notice that you let them go ahead of you. But you'll know. And it can change your whole day, which could be a way to change your whole life. And maybe one person in the car in the lane next to you will notice your casual generosity and will be touched, lifted, encouraged. In other words, slightly changed for the better. And later we'll let someone else go first. The movement of grace towards gratitude brings us from the package of self-obsessed madness to a spiritual awakening. Gratitude is peace.
Oh my. There's so
Good.
much in there. That's
Okay.
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. That piece about in the beginning, just about the heart. I mean, everything comes from the heart. We're so living in our heads these days that
Mm-hmm.
we're worrying about this and that and transactions here. Did someone do something for me? All this kind of thing. But if you search your heart, I think that's where gratitude gratitude should come from.
Yeah.
I
And
love all that.
gratitude is peace. What a lovely message for the holiday season and going into the new year. And no, I think that's it for today. I think that's a good note to end on. What do you think?
Yeah, we'll leave some resources in the show notes, all those research papers and podcasts that we talked about,
Yep.
as always. And where can people find you, Sandy?
They can find me at swansoncoaching.com. Where can people find you, Dave?
CoachDshen.com.
Excellent. Well, Dave, I'm grateful for you and for all of our listeners. Wishing everyone a peaceful and gratitude filled new year. We'll see you next time. Bye,
And
Dave.
I too am grateful for you and everybody else listening to us to this time. And have a happy new year too, as well.
All right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.